On November 22, 1985, a truck driver was driving down a rural road in Malabar, Florida, when he noticed a young woman crawling by the roadside. He stopped the car and walked toward her to ask if she needed help. As he got closer, he saw her condition clearly. She was completely naked. Her wrists and ankles were bound by handcuffs, and her body was covered with wounds. Before he could say anything, the woman saw him and begged not to be taken back to that house. Realizing something was terribly wrong, the driver asked the woman where the house was, then immediately took her to his home and called the police. After arriving at the hospital, the woman was identified as 19-year-old Laura Murphy. According to the doctor, Laura had strangulation marks on her neck, but what was killing her was the blood loss. She had lost nearly half of her blood in a short period of time. Once she was safe, Laura told the police what had happened. A day earlier, she had been hitchhiking by the roadside. Then, a man stopped his car and warmly offered to drive her to nearby Melbourne, but before that, he needed to go home to pick up a work notebook. After arriving at the house, the man first invited her inside. However, when she refused, he wrapped a rope around her neck and strangled her until she lost consciousness. Later, when she woke up, Laura found herself naked, tied to a kitchen counter, unable to move her hands or feet, and the man was standing nearby. He had already set up a camera and lights. Over the next 22 hours, he repeatedly raped her, used a medical syringe and tube to draw blood from her arms, and even poured her blood into a large cup, drank it, and told her that he was a vampire. The next morning, after the third sexual assault and blood draw, the man handcuffed her in the bathroom, saying he needed to go out, would return later to continue, and warned that if she tried to escape, his brother would find her and kill her. Then, once he had left the house, Laura used all her strength to push open the bathroom window screen and climbed out. Due to excessive blood loss, she was unable to walk and could only rely on her will to survive, crawling all the way to the roadside. After learning the details of the case, the police obtained a search warrant for the house based on the address, Laura said. At 2:30 a.m. on November 23rd, the police arrested the man Laura had described during the search. He was 39-year-old John Brennan Crutchley, a computer engineer at Harris Corporation, a defense and information technology contractor. During the subsequent search of the house, the police found items that led them to reassess the nature of the case. Photographs taken during the initial search showed a stack of credit cards several inches thick, mostly belonging to women, multiple women's necklaces and several locks of hair, and the camera and lights Laura had described. But parts of the videotapes had been intentionally erased. Laura later confirmed that the erased footage was the recording of her rape and the blood being drawn. In the second search, the police found a stack of 72 index cards recording the names, addresses, and phone numbers of multiple women, as well as descriptions of their sexual encounters with him. In his office, the police also found handcuffs, a handgun, ropes, a large number of homemade sex tapes featuring him and his wife, a book titled The Dracula Syndrome, and several women's ID cards. These items made the police realize that they were facing not only an extremely heinous rape and kidnapping case, but perhaps many other cases hidden behind it, even murders. At the same time, investigators also began looking into Crutchley's upbringing. On October 1st, 1946, he was born into a wealthy family in Clarksburg, West Virginia, the youngest of 3 children. According to his own account, his sister, Donna, had died during an emergency surgery a year before his birth. Their mother was crushed by the loss of his sister and let down that he was not a girl. Then, for the first 6 years of his life, she dressed him in girls' clothing. In addition to being forced to wear dresses, his parents beat him with a belt until he blacked out and burned his fingers with a curling iron. According to his words, Crutchley was a child stripped of his identity, raised in violence and shame, and he never got any help. Then, the police contacted the behavioral science unit of the FBI, and criminal profiler Robert Ressler was brought in to assist. After analyzing the case materials and speaking with Crutchley personally, Robert reached a conclusion. The police had most likely caught a serial killer. He believed that Crutchley was an organized serial killer. His imprisonment of Laura, the videotaping and the drawing of blood and drinking it, these acts went beyond sexual violence. What made Robert even more certain was Crutchley's pattern of moving from state to state. He had lived and worked in multiple states, and in almost every place he had resided, there were records of women who had disappeared or died. January 28, 1978, in Fairfax County, Virginia, 25-year-old Deborah Rita Fitzjohn disappeared. She was Crutchley's girlfriend. She was last seen alive in Crutchley's trailer at Wapples Mobile Home Estates. 9 months later, a hunter found Deborah's remains. He claimed that Deborah had visited him the night before she disappeared, but he had fallen asleep in front of the television, and when he woke up, she had already left. On March 15, 1985, in Mims, Florida, 29-year-old Patty Lou Valansky decided to hitchhike and left her residence on foot and was never seen again. In Crutchley's office, investigators found her ID card. Crutchley stated that he had given her a ride, but after she began making unwanted demands, he let her out of the car. He explained that he had found her ID card on the car seat the next day. In addition to Patty's ID card, the police also found ID cards belonging to several other women. One of them belonged to 25-year-old Nancy K. Brown. In June 1983, she disappeared while vacationing in Cocoa Beach. Her remains were found the following March. Another belonged to 16-year-old Cheryl Ann Windsor, who was reported missing by her mother in April 1984. Her remains and those of another 20-year-old woman, Diana Lee Casey, were found on Merritt Island. On January 30, 1985, in the Malabar area where Crutchley lived, partial remains of 2 women were found in a patch of brush. The first one was identified as Kimberly Ann Walker from Vero Beach, Florida. She was last seen in June 1984 when she got into a light-colored compact car, and Crutchley owned a beige 1982 Nissan Stanza. The other partial remains belonged to Jeanette Marcotte from Saskatchewan, Canada. In addition to these cases, investigators also reviewed unsolved cases in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. that might be connected to Crutchley, and the FBI and local police agreed that he may be involved in the missing and death of 30 women. However, although the circumstantial evidence kept piling up, investigators could never find enough solid evidence to tie Crutchley directly to any murder. In court, he was only charged with the kidnapping and sexual assault of Laura. In April 1986, he accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to 1 count of kidnapping and 3 counts of sexual assault. In exchange, the prosecution dropped the aggravated battery charges related to drawing the victim's blood, as well as drug possession charges. At the sentencing hearing, the blood drinking was brought up again. Crutchley explained that during a sexual ritual in 1970, a nurse had taught him to drink blood. And in Laura's case, he had not actually drunk her blood because it had coagulated before he could drink it, and he could not swallow it. The prosecution called Robert as a witness. In his testimony, Robert detailed his behavioral analysis of Crutchley and his professional judgment that Crutchley fit the profile of a serial killer. In the end, Brevard County Circuit Judge John Antoon decided to exceed the state sentencing guidelines, sentencing Crutchley to 25 years to life in prison, plus 50 years of parole. John stated that the crime was so grotesque and horrifying that it demanded the highest level of punishment. Throughout the entire trial, Crutchley's wife stood by his side. She did not testify in court, but when interviewed by the media, she defended her husband's actions of kidnapping and torturing Laura. She described her husband's actions as a gentle rape with no visible brutality, claiming her husband was just a man with some quirks. During the Thanksgiving holiday, she had taken their child to visit relatives out of town, while her husband stayed home and tortured the young hitchhiker for 22 hours. Later, Crutchley was sent to the Union Correctional Institution in Rayford, Florida. On August 8, 1996, after serving 11 years, he was released for good behavior and transferred to the Orlando Probation and Restitution Center. However, his freedom lasted less than 24 hours. The next day, he was arrested again after testing positive for marijuana. This parole violation became his 3rd conviction in the state of Florida, and under the state's 3 strikes law, Crutchley was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on January 31, 1997. While in prison, Crutchley continued to show extreme and abnormal behavior. Prison guards even found that he had 13 piercings on his genitals, one of which had a padlock attached. March 30th, 2002. 55-year-old Crutchley died inside the Hardy Correctional Institution. When the guards found him, he had a plastic bag over his head. The initial report listed the cause of death as asphyxiation, and investigators also believed it was suicide. However, as the investigation continued and based on statements from other inmates, his death was confirmed to be an accident during autoerotic asphyxiation. But his death did not provide any answers regarding the unsolved disappearances and murders tied to him. He was suspected of killing as many as 30 women, yet he was never convicted of any murder. The ID cards, necklaces, and hair found in his possession, and the unidentified female remains found in areas where he had lived, remained only circumstantial evidence. Whether John Brennan Crutchley was in fact a serial killer, how many victims he had killed, these questions remain unanswered.